I'd like to put forth a very simple hypothesis today. That being this: the company behind the Firefox web browser has been taken over by force by a cabal of anti-privacy, pro-advertising, pro-AI individuals who are willing to sacrifice the current user base of Firefox to achieve their financial goals. Now, that may seem outlandish, that may seem wildly crazy, but I believe that the stated facts, the activities, the recent events, the words that came out of Mozilla back up that hypothesis rather well. Follow along with me here. So let's look to start with at the recent release of Firefox version 128. Now, besides being an extremely large version number, this version, which came out just this last week, includes a new bit of on-by-default functionality called privacy-preserving attribution. Now, what is that? What is privacy-preserving attribution, you ask? That sounds great. Oh my gosh, I love privacy and I want to preserve it. So let's have something called privacy-preserving, right? That sounds fantastic. What could possibly go wrong? So here it is. This is, in essence, a bit of functionality specifically designed for online advertisers and websites which implement advertising, which collects and reports browsing activity back to the advertising companies. Now, I hear many of you saying, but this uses the word privacy. Preserving of privacy, that means it's private, and private is good, right? Well, here's the deal. Naming this bit of functionality privacy-preserving attribution was a stroke of deceptive genius, as it truly does not preserve privacy, and that is by design. This is an example of doublespeak. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. 2 + 2 = 5. To fully understand the extent to which this is doublespeak, let's look at how privacy-preserving attribution actually works from very high level, and let's go over it step by step. All right, so here's how it works. First, the Firefox web browser, with its privacy-preserving attribution, collects your data as you browse a website. Now, using this privacy-preserving attribution, that data is then sent to a Mozilla server, right? So the company behind Firefox, they have a server which will slurp up all of your browsing habits, right? What you click on, what you see, how long you spend there, all that good stuff, right? Then, step 3, Mozilla will then bundle all that data up on their server and put it together with multiple other users' data. So your data from browsing and my data from browsing and Ted from accounting, his data from browsing, it will all be pulled together into one batch of data. And that data will be sent in a big old bundle, a wad of data, over to the servers of the advertising companies, okay? And then they can use it to do whatever dark magic they wish to do. Now, in theory, this would allow for some of the data being sent to advertisers to be potentially a little bit more private, or at least slightly obfuscated by having all of that data from multiple users smashed together, right? It's not sent individually, so they're not just saying, oh, well, this one guy's browsing habits is all of this. They are seeing the browsing habit of 3 guys all smashed together. So in theory, it would be privacy through obfuscation. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. There are 3 major key problems here. The first is that data is being sent to the Mozilla server, the Firefox server, in a way that is neither anonymous nor is it private. Mozilla knows everything, right? They're getting it from you. Now, they can claim that they're not using it in a non-privacy restrictive way, but that's all we have to take their word for that. They're getting all of the data from you and they have it. Now, here's the problem. Mozilla now owns an advertising company. They just recently bought an ad company, which means Mozilla is the advertiser in this scenario. So follow me here on this. You are sending Mozilla your private information, your identifiable data, And then Mozilla is transferring it from one of their servers, boink, boink, to another server. Right? So that obfuscation step, that step where it smashes all the data together, it becomes instantly irrelevant because Mozilla has all of your data in multiple ways stored on multiple servers. They're the ad company now. Mozilla is, in theory, using privacy-preserving attribution, trying to obscure your user data from the other part of the same company. It's ridiculous. And even if neither of those things were true, right? Even if none of that was the case at all, there is still enough data sent, even in batches, to reconstruct personal and identifiable information, right? So as you can see, privacy-preserving attribution appears to be custom designed to give the appearance of privacy without actually providing true privacy. This is crazy, right? It almost appears when you look at the design of this, like someone sat down in a boardroom and is like, you know what kids these days like? They like privacy. How can we tell them that we're giving them privacy, but somehow give them less than they have now? And then they came up with this. And Mozilla did this knowingly. In fact, they did it in conjunction with Facebook. They worked with Facebook to pull this off. Yeah. Right? Now, let's put all of this in context. Because I think context is really important, because there have been some massive changes at Mozilla over the last year, especially, that paints all of this in a very particular picture. That hypothesis I put to you at the very beginning here, that Mozilla, the company behind Firefox, has been essentially taken over by a cabal of pro-advertising, anti-privacy individuals. So let's look at this. And I've been covering Mozilla for a while, and most of the coverage I've done of that company has gotten me yelled at, right? I've been yelled at by people from Mozilla. I've been yelled at by pro-open source people who feel like I'm somehow attacking open source by pointing out how truly evil the company behind Firefox has been as of late, and even other tech journalists have been, oh, no, Mozilla and Firefox, they love open source and privacy, and they're the protectors of the free and open web. They just refuse to see the truth that's sitting in front of their faces. So let's walk through this. To start with, let's talk about the fact, and I'm just going to gloss over a lot of this really quickly, but Firefox and Mozilla have had some really sketchy finances for a long time, many years now. I've covered this in great detail. I did an article, it was 2 years back, called Firefox Money, investigating the bizarre finances of Mozilla, which goes into in-depth on some of their very strange spending and the massive amount of money they have on hand and the weird places they put it and the weird ways that they get it. It's bizarre. So it's worth noting that there have been problems with their corporate finances for quite some time. And that's been exacerbated over the last year or two, where we've seen Firefox Marketshare, right? Which, Firefox is not the only product they make. They also have Thunderbird, an email client, and a VPN suite, and all these other things. But Firefox is their bread and butter. That's where most of their revenue comes from. And over the last few years, the Firefox market share has been nosediving. It has been dropping rapidly. From 2021 to 2022, it went down from 3.79% to 3.04%. That's almost a full percentage point drop in 1 year. Where it's gone since then, not up. It's not going great. But what's amazing is over that same period of time, the CEO compensation of that company has shot through the roof. It went from $5.6 million per year, to $6.9 million per year. And then things got really wacky, because the company started to say, you know what? We've drafted up a 5-year plan. And we don't think Firefox is really a part of it. This is a very real thing. In the 5-year plan that they put forward, was it a 5-year plan or was it a 15-year plan? Oh, now I'm not even remembering. This was so long ago I wrote this article. I'll link to these articles so you can read it. But they put forward a 25-year plan. I was way off. A 25-year roadmap from Mozilla. They published this, I believe it was last summer. In their 25-year roadmap for the company, Firefox, the web browser, is not mentioned one time, other than a brief mentioning of how they needed more things like Firefox. But they don't need Firefox, right? Mostly what they mentioned was artificial intelligence, right? They mentioned specifically that they were investing in 5 AI companies, Secure AI Labs, Lilapa AI, the Data Nutrition Project, and a few others. And they were talking about artificial intelligence, and more artificial intelligence. That was their plan that they put forward for the next quarter of a century of the maker of Firefox. Not web browsing, not more new, better versions of Firefox, but AI. Wild, right? And then here's what's really crazy is what month was this? In June, so just about a month ago, Mozilla was sued by one of their former C-level executives who was being groomed to be the new CEO. Right? He was being groomed to be the new CEO. And while he was out on medical leave, on temporary medical leave, individuals from the Mozilla board of directors swooped in and took over the whole darn company. They ousted him as the incoming soon-to-be CEO. They voted to install one of their own as the new CEO, and then turned around and immediately purchased an advertising company, and then followed that up within weeks by implementing new functionality within Firefox specifically to collect your data and send it to the advertising company that they just bought and owned themselves. It's wild. It's absolutely wild that all of this is happening, and it's happening very quickly. We've seen the writing on the wall for some time that things are amiss within the maker of Firefox. But really, earlier this year, when the new CEO took over, conducted essentially a hostile takeover of the corporation, ousted the person who was going to be the new CEO, ousted the old CEO, and then started forcing the company down an advertising-focused path, you're starting to see really rapid changes within the actual product they produce, within Firefox itself. And based on the current trajectory, based on how quickly these changes are coming out, new companies being purchased, focusing on advertising, new APIs being rolled out, new APIs being adopted and included in new functionality within Firefox, really focusing on advertising, really focusing on data collection. And you couple that together with the roadmap, which doesn't even include Firefox for the next quarter of a century. It paints a picture of the next several months being a fairly wild ride here. I would expect to see more movement towards advertising, more movement towards AI, and more moving away from the core Firefox user base. And the thing that's wild to me here is they know what their core user base is. The people that run Mozilla are very, very well aware that one of their claims to fame is that they are the alternative to Google and Google's web rendering engine. They are pro-privacy. They are anti-data collection. They are pro-freedom and pro-open source and the free and open web. These are the sort of mantras and ethos that really drive people to use Firefox. And now they are purposefully going the opposite direction, right? They're saying, let's go towards data collection. Let's go towards advertising. Yeah, this is starting to get confusing. It's starting to get very confusing, I think, for many Firefox diehards, because the company that they're looking at running Firefox is not recognizable almost in any way from the company that existed 10 years ago or even earlier. There was a time when many people in the open source world attached themselves to Mozilla, right? When they said, whatever Linux distribution they run, or maybe they run Mac or Windows, whatever they're doing, they want to support open source, and they viewed Mozilla as really being sort of the poster child of open source. In fact, many organizations falsely claim that the term open source actually originated at the genesis of what became Mozilla. Right? There's a claim from the Open Source Institute and many others that the term open source was first used when they were talking about open sourcing Netscape and creating what became the Mozilla engine and all these sorts of things. Of course, that's just a myth. That's false. The term open source has been used by Digital Research and many other companies for years prior to that time. I covered this all in an article over at the Lunduke Journal as well. But that doesn't stop many individuals, including the OSI and so many others, from closely coupling the concept of open source and openness in general and pro-privacy and pro-security and all these other things that all tend to get globbed together with Mozilla, right? They kind of tie the two together conceptually. And yet here we have Mozilla as a corporation. It's both a corporation and a foundation. One owns the other, but it's essentially one entity, essentially, from a logistical purpose for 99% of it. But it is not any of those things now, right? It is moving rapidly in the opposite direction of what most of its users want. So what happens when the bulk of the Firefox diehards are forced to, at the very least, go to one of the Firefox forks? It's a lot of alliteration, in order to get away from what the Firefox company is doing. What happens if they move over to browsers like Brave or so many others? And you see that happening regularly, and not just because of this, but also because of the wild censorship-heavy politics of Mozilla. I mean, I mention this regularly, but it bears mentioning. Mozilla has a stated policy of wiping everyone right of center off the internet. That is their stated goal. They have several posts talking about it, where if a person is more conservative leaning, they should be more than deplatformed. And what does that mean? That means that they need to be taken off the internet, because deplatforming is being taken off of a platform. What's more than that? Well, you take them off the entire internet. That's the only next thing that's more than deplatforming. So that's Mozilla's stated goal. Is if you're, let's say, a libertarian or a Republican or just a centrist Democrat in the United States, you need to be removed from the internet, not allowed to speak. That's the Mozilla policy. And so the weird, extremely political policies of a web browser, of all things, coupled together with their crazy data collection, they're tying into advertising, their pro-advertising stance, even to the point of where they are now an advertising company. The one thing that really differentiated them from Google's an advertising company, and they have a web browser. Why would you trust an advertising company with your web browsing? Well, you wouldn't, so use Firefox. Oh, Firefox is an advertising company now too. No difference. And so people are just leaving in droves. I would not be surprised if the market share that is already just cataclysmically low doesn't drop ever further. So I want to sum up this here. I want to say flat out, it appears that this hypothesis that Mozilla's been taken over by a cabal of anti-privacy, pro-advertising individuals appears to be 100% true. If I'm wrong on this, if I'm off base, I want to, as always, invite representatives from Mozilla to tell me I'm wrong, right? If you send me a statement, Mozilla, I will publish it in full without editing it because I want your views to be heard. Because unlike you, I don't want to do more than deplatforming of Mozilla. I want you to be able to speak your mind just as like I speak mine. I'm not seeking to censor you. You are seeking to censor me. Prove me wrong by conversing with me on this. Now, as usual, I've reached out to Mozilla. They have not provided a response because they are one of the most secretive organizations on planet Earth. They simply do not interact with the press. They just don't. All right, so this is fascinating. We'll see how this unfolds. My guess is by the time the next release of Firefox hits, which is going to be in just a couple of weeks, because this is how they roll these out, Firefox 129 will be out before you know it, we will see more functionality along these lines. More on-by-default data collection advertising functionality will be included. If not in that version, then in the version after. They're gonna ramp through this pretty gosh darn quickly, and we're going to see Mozilla ramp themselves up as an advertising company. And, you know, many people may like that because they could view that as a diversification of the company's revenue streams, which have really had a problem in that most of their revenue comes from Google advertising and search placement. So, in theory, some people might be pretty psyched about Firefox becoming a data collecting advertising browser. Me, personally, I think it kind of sucks. And I'm just going to keep using other browsers. There's a lot of great ones out there, including several Firefox forks that are excellent. So many F's in alliterating there. Brave, I highly recommend, and many other browsers out there are worth looking at that respect privacy a whole lot more than Firefox does at this point. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes, across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.